In this exercise, we are going to be going through a limited or scarce resource decision. So let's read through the data set first and we'll talk more about the problem. GTC Bikes manufactures 3 different bicycles, each of a different type. These bicycles are made out of a specialized alloy that was developed by this manufacturer. The use of this alloy is this company's strategic advantage. Unfortunately, the manufacturer that produces this alloy for GTC has been stressed by the dramatic increase in sales, and they cannot keep up with production needs. At most, they can produce 10,000 linear feet of the alloy used in the tubing of the bicycles per year. So that's our limited resource, is this alloy. The product information is as follows. So we have 3 different bikes, A, B, and C. They each have their own unit selling price, their own unit variable cost, and their own unit contribution margin. Keep in mind, contribution margin is simply selling price minus variable cost. So that's already been calculated for you, the unit contribution margin. Keep in mind, it also tells you the information about how many linear feet of this tubing is required for each type of bike, and what the annual demand is for each product. So keep in mind, we said we can only have 10,000 linear feet. So we need to figure out, do we have enough to satisfy all the demand? And generally with these types of problems, the answer is no. So we're going to have to figure out which product do we focus our efforts on first. So let's take a look. Question A. How many linear feet of tubing would be required to produce each of the 3 bicycles to their full capacity? So the linear feet number given to you here is for each individual bike. Now we have a demand for each bike, so all we need to do for A, B, and C is multiply the demanded number of units by the linear feet of tubing required. So for A, it would be 400 times 6, so 2,400. For B, it would be 350 multiplied by 9. And for C, it would be 500 multiplied by 13. Now, right off the bat, if you want to check, if we add all 3 of those up, that demand would require 12,050 square feet. We only have 10,000 square feet, linear feet available to us. So if we needed to calculate the contribution margin per unit for each bike, we would simply go up and carry this amount from up above. Bike A is going to be $300 per unit, Bike B is $375, and Bike C is $600. This is how we determine profitability when we have no scarce resource. We use the contribution margin per unit because that tells us how much profit per se each unit is going to add to our bottom line. Now that takes us to C. If the specialized alloy was not a scarce resource, what would the ranking be for each bike, starting with most profitable, moving to least profitable? So again, we're focusing solely on the contribution margin per unit now. So Bike C is obviously the most profitable at 600. Bike B is the middle at 375. Bike A is the least profitable because it only makes us $300 per unit. Now D, here is where the scarce resource problem really becomes important. When we know that we have one individual scarce resource, we can no longer focus on the contribution margin per unit to determine profitability. Instead, we have to look at the contribution margin per unit of scarce resource. So now we're not focusing on the per bike unit. Instead, we're going to look at per feet, per linear foot. The unit contribution margin per foot. So notice, Bike A gives us $300, but it requires only 6 feet to give us that $300. Bike C Yes, it gives us $600, but it requires 13 feet of our scarce resource to do so. So what we can do here now is we just divide the contribution margin by the number of feet. So 300 divided by 6 for bike A. $50 of contribution margin per linear foot. Now bike B was 375 divided by 9. So that's $41 and about 67 cents. Bike C is 600 divided by 13. Now this is $46 and about 15 cents. So now this takes us to E, where we say, now that we know that the alloy is a scarce resource, how would we rank each bike, starting with the most profitable, moving to the least profitable? So now we're going to use the contribution margin per linear foot. So now the most profitable is bike A at $50 per foot. The second most profitable is bike C, and let's just round it to $46.15. And then the least profitable is bike B, rounding to $41.67 per square foot. Now what this generally means, once we know the most profitable and the least profitable, this tells us the order we need to go into. We know we don't have enough square footage or linear footage of this alloy to cover all of our demand. So what we have to do is figure out which one do we want to focus on first, fulfill all the demand for that, move on to the next profitable bike, fulfill as much of the demand as we can, and if there's any left, then we'll go to the least profitable bike. We don't want to make any more than what is demanded, because then there'll just be excess bikes sitting around. We'd prefer to go right up to demand in the proper order. So bike A was the most profitable, and it has, it's asking what quantity of each bike should we produce. So the demand there was 400, but remember it was 6 linear feet. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put 400 because that's the answer, but I'm also going to put how many square feet we're using so far, just so we can keep track of that. Now we've only used 2,400. We should have enough to meet the demand for the second bike, but let's test it out. The second bike was actually bike C at 46.15, so we'll jump to that one first. There was a demand for 500, and they used 13 square linear feet. 513 feet. So now we've used another 6,500. Now we're down to one bike. We know we don't have enough to meet all of the demand. So here we have to do a little trick and basically figure out what have we already used up and what do we have left. So we've used up 8,900 linear feet. We only have 10,000. In other words, we have 1,100 linear feet left to use. That's what we have to work with our production for the last bike. If we go to bike B, it takes 9 linear feet. So what we basically need to do for this is take 1,100 divided by 9 to figure out how many we can actually produce. Now it could in many cases give you a rounded or a number with a decimal or a fraction, but we don't really need the fraction. We have to drop it off. We always have to round it down because we can only produce 122 bikes. We're not going to start on a bike and complete it halfway. So instead, we're going to produce 122 bikes. So, and that would give us 122 multiplied by 9. So if we do the math and we check our work here, we've used up 9,998 square feet. We had 10,000 square feet to use. That just basically means we have 10,000 extra square linear feet to use of this product, which again, that's fine. It wasn't enough to make one full bike. Now take a look at G. Given our constraints, what is the maximum amount of profit this company can earn this year? So I'm going to take this data off now, and we're going to take a look at the contribution margin for each bike. So we have 300, 375, and 600. So if we just do a little subtotal here, what I did was multiplied by the quantity of each bike multiplied by the contribution margin. We end up with 465,750. But the problem is there's one big important piece of information missing from here. Fixed cost. It tells us nothing about what our fixed cost is. Contribution margin is first used to cover the fixed cost, and then whatever's left is used to cover profit. So we don't know anything about fixed cost here. We can assume perhaps it's zero, although that's a little bit of an unreasonable assumption. But absent any information about fixed cost, the question says, what is the maximum amount of profit this company can earn this year? The absolute maximum would be 465,750 if there were no fixed costs. Again, we don't know for sure if this is the case, but it's just something to think about. Let's say we had $100,000 in fixed cost, then our maximum profit would actually be $365,750. So hopefully that helps to clarify the limited or scarce resource decisions that managers may need to make from time to time. Thank you for your time.